Welcome to week 19 of Come Follow Me, the land of Lehi-Nephi. This week we're going to be going through chapters 7, 8, 9, and 10 of Mosiah. I hope you find it interesting because these are great chapters. As we begin chapter 7 of Mosiah, we have just finished King Benjamin's address. Mosiah has been installed as king, and the people have lived in peace and prosperity for the space of 3 years, when out of the blue, Mormon speaks of Mosiah's curiosity concerning a group we have not heard anything about until now. But the way it's written, it sounds as if we should have. It says, speaking of Mosiah, he was desirous to know concerning the people who went up to dwell in the land of Lehi-Nephi, or in the city of Lehi-Nephi, for his people had heard nothing from them from the time they left the land of Zarahemla. This is a very odd verse. Mormon makes it sound like we already know all about these people and have been as curious as Mosiah about their condition, and yet this is the first time we hear about them. We are wont to say, what people? Who are you talking about? And when did they leave? And why? When I first read this, I had to stop and go back and scan through the pages to find out who he was talking about. But there was nothing. So I find this odd, but intriguing. Thankfully, Mormon is not going to leave us in the dark too long, but we have to know some more information before we can learn what this is all about. Keep in mind this is an abridgment, so we are not going to get all the details right up front. One would think that this tale would have started with, and in such and such a year there were a group of people who were desirous to go up into the land of Lehi-Nephi, and they left, and we have not heard from them since. See, just that little bit would have made sense and would have led us right into the rest of the story. But Mormon knows the story will unfold as we go along, so we just have to sit back and be patient. It's actually pretty good storytelling, to be honest, as our curiosity will make us pay attention. We want to know who these people are and what happened to them, just like Mosiah does. If this were a TV show, Mormon would have said, "Don't go away, we'll be right back." As we pick up the story, Mosiah sends 16 strong men out to go in search of the land of Lehi-Nephi and to inquire about their people. The record says they didn't know where to go, so they wandered for 40 days until they came to a place called Shiloh. From that point, their leader Ammon took 3 of his men and went down into the land of Nephi, where they came upon a king who was out and about with his guards. Ammon and his men were immediately arrested by this king and bound and sent to a prison where they sat for 2 days waiting for some kind of resolution to their situation. After 2 days, they were released from their bands and they were brought before the king, whose name was Limhi, and he was anxious to begin his interrogation. And he said unto them, Behold, I am Limhi, the son of Noah, who was the son of Zeniff, who came up out of the land of Zarahemla to inherit this land, which was the land of their fathers, who was made a king by the voice of the people. From this we can gather that first Exodus happened 3 generations ago, so probably 50 or 60 years ago. Mormon keeps us hanging for just a bit on this. Here again, this is the first time we hear about Noah or Zeniff. Who were they? They must have left during the time of the first Mosiah, King Benjamin's father. That would have put them back in the time period covered by the book of Omni. And remember, that was a record on the small plates. And the writers of the small plates of Nephi were instructed not to put too much of the secular history on those plates, which were already getting filled up. I think that is why this is the first time we are hearing about these people. Anyway, Limhi continues. And now I desire to know the cause whereby ye were so bold as to come near the walls of the city, when I myself was with my guards without the gate. And now for this cause have I suffered that ye should be preserved, that I might inquire of you, or else I should have caused that my guards should have put you to death. Ye are permitted to speak. So Ammon went forth and bowed himself before the king, and said, I am Ammon, and am a descendant of Zarahemla, and have come up out of the land of Zarahemla to inquire concerning our brethren, whom Zeniff brought up out of the land. And now it came to pass that after Limhi had heard the words of Ammon, he was exceedingly glad, and said, Now I know of a surety that my brethren who were in the land of Zarahemla are yet alive, and on the morrow I will cause that my people shall rejoice also. Now, isn't this interesting? It turns out that Limhi has been as curious about the people of Zarahemla as Mosiah has been about the people of Lehi-Nephi. Neither of them knew anything about the other group's condition. And that feels very real to me. I can see that happening. Anyway, Limhi explains to Ammon that he and his people have been under the thumb of the local Lamanite king, and that they are being taxed to the degree of 50% of all they have and produce. As he explains their plight, it becomes apparent that he is a good man and a faithful man. He tells his people, Therefore lift up your heads and rejoice, and put your trust in God, in that God who was the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. As he speaks, though, we see that his people have gone through a dark period. He says this, Behold, it is because of our iniquities and abominations that he has brought us into bondage. For if this people had not fallen into transgression, the Lord would not have suffered that this great evil should come upon them. But behold, they would not hearken unto his words. But there arose contentions among them, even so much that they did shed blood among themselves. And then Limhi mentions a particular event that we have not yet heard about. He says, And a prophet of the Lord have they slain, yea, a chosen man of God, who told them of their wickedness and abominations, and prophesied of many things which are to come, yea, even the coming of Christ. And now because he said this, they did put him to death. And many more things did they do, which brought down the wrath of God upon them. Therefore, who wondereth that they are in bondage, and that they are smitten with sore affliction? It sounds like there's quite a tale in there to be told, and indeed we are going to hear that story. I think, though, that I will hold off on that story for just a bit as we get through some more of this stuff. However, I do want to talk about one point right now. Limhi says, Therefore, who wondereth that they are in bondage, and that they are smitten with sore afflictions? In our world today, we think of all the trials and tribulations as direct results of politics and military might and economic oppression and so on. We see every event as having winners and losers, usually based on strength and stratagem. But throughout the stories of the Book of Mormon, and certainly right here with Limhi and Ammon, we are hearing these men talk about trials and tribulations as the direct results of disobedience and wickedness. No wonder they are in bondage, Limhi says. After all, they killed a prophet. They have done many things to bring down the wrath of God upon them. That's an idea you never hear about these days. People do not seem to equate wickedness with bondage and tribulation. To be fair, the people of Lehi-Nephi didn't either, nor have any of the people that found themselves in situations. That is, not until a prophet or a king can call them to repentance with a voice loud enough to hear. Today, our prophets and kings are all TV personalities and internet influencers, and their messages, sadly, just don't ring with the words of God. We are constantly bombarded with the wisdom of the world, which the scriptures tell us is foolishness. So as we continue into chapter 8, we find King Limhi teaching his people all about their brethren in Zarahemla. And Mormon says, "For he spake many things unto them, and only a few have I written in this book." He told his people all the things concerning his brethren who were in the land of Zarahemla. And then he asked Ammon to stand up and tell them everything that had happened to their brethren from the time that Zeniff left Zarahemla until the time that he, Ammon, arrived back in their land. So Ammon gives them the speech that King Benjamin just gave him, and he explained as best he could what those words meant. At this point, we get another wonderful nugget of a great story that we will have to wait until the end of the Book of Mormon to hear. But we see where that story came from. Because after Ammon shared King Benjamin's address with the people, King Limhi dismissed them all to return to their homes, and then he took the opportunity to share with Ammon more of the history of his people. He brought out the records that had been kept by his own people, which is a good thing, because it shows that he understood the importance of record keeping, something which his ancestors, the original Mulekites, did not do, to their great detriment. But when Limhi realizes that Ammon can read his record, he's excited. Here's what it says. Now, as soon as Ammon had read the record, the king inquired of him to know if he could interpret languages. And Ammon told him that he could not. The king tells Ammon that a while ago he had sent out 43 of his people into the wilderness to find Zarahemla, to seek help for his people in the bondage they were under. Just like Ammon, they probably wandered for a long time, but they did not find Zarahemla. I guess it was as difficult for them as it had been for Ammon and his brethren to find them. Anyway, here's what it says. And they were lost in the wilderness for the space of many days, yet they were diligent, and found not Zarahemla, but returned to this land, having traveled in a land among many waters, having discovered a land which was covered with dry bones of men and of beasts, and was also covered with the ruins of buildings of every kind, having discovered a land which had been peopled with a people who were as numerous as the hosts of Israel. And for a testimony that the things that they had said are true, they have brought 24 plates, which are filled with engravings, and they are of pure gold. These men also brought back many more items, swords and breastplates, and other things as well, and all of it attested to the fact that these things were very old. I guess ancient would be the correct word. Limhi wanted to know if Ammon could translate these gold plates, but Ammon said he could not. He did, however, know someone who could. And the scriptures say, Now Ammon said unto him, I can assuredly tell thee, O king, of a man that can translate the records, for he has wherewith that he can look and translate all records that are of ancient date, and it is a gift from God. And the things are called interpreters, and no man can look in them except he be commanded, lest he should look for that he ought not, and he should perish. And whosoever is commanded to look in them, the same is called a seer. And behold, the king of the land of Zarahemla is a man that is commanded to do these things, and who has this high gift from God. Of course, the man Ammon speaks of is Mosiah, and the interpreters mentioned here are known to us today as the Urim and Thummim, the same device used by Joseph Smith to translate the Book of Mormon. And the gold plates mentioned are the record of the Jaredites. We will read their story when we get to the book of Ether, but interestingly, this one mention here in Mosiah 8, and then virtually the same scripture again in Mosiah 28, are the only references to these plates in Mormon's entire abridgment, except for one mentioned 60 years later in Alma 37, where Alma the Younger is talking to his son Helaman, and he mentions the 24 gold plates, but tells Helaman not to reveal their content to the people. And that's it. Not another mention in the rest of the book that Mormon wrote. I do not want to speak for Mormon, but I imagine his mandate was to abridge the record of the Nephites and the Lamanites, and this record of the Jaredites, a completely different people from a completely different age 2,000 years earlier, was not part of his mandate. Thankfully, after he passed the record on to his son, Moroni decided that the story had value and included it with his father's abridgment. And so we have the amazing Book of Ether tacked on to the end of the Book of Mormon. And I am so glad we do. I can hardly wait to get to that story because it has some astounding and profound truths in it that I'm anxious to share with you. But there's so much else in these scriptures, so let's keep going. We turn to Mosiah 9, and instantly we see that something is different. The voice has changed, and the author has changed, and there's no explanation why. We just read, I, Zeniff, having been taught in all the languages of the Nephites. If you're like me, you said, wait a minute, and you flip back a few pages to see if you'd missed something again or overlooked something, but no, you're doing just fine. This is a whole new, fascinating track that Mormon puts us on, and he obviously does not feel compelled to explain himself. He figures the text will make all things clear, and indeed it does. If you look at the timeline in the chapter heading, you see that we are going back in time approximately 60 to 80 years. Mosiah's time was approximately 124 BC, but now we're going back to between 200 and 187 BC. Remember back in Mosiah 7, the first verse said, speaking of Mosiah, he was desirous to know concerning the people who went up to dwell in the land of Lehi-Nephi. Well, he tells us nothing about who they were or even why they left. It is only when Ammon gets to Lehi-Nephi in verse 9 and meets King Limhi that we hear the name Zeniff mentioned as Limhi's grandfather. But even there, we don't really learn anything about him except that he and his followers wanted to inherit this land, which was the land of their fathers. So we are still left wondering about him. In Omni, we read only a little bit about Coriantumr and a large stone with engravings on it, which Grandpa Mosiah, father of King Benjamin, interpreted. But then no more on him either until the Book of Ether. From all of this, it is clear that Mormon was sticking to his mandate to abridge the record of his people, not any other people. So, okay, let's go back to chapter 9 and this sudden introduction to the record from Zeniff. Notice that Zeniff starts his record the same way Nephi did. I, Zeniff, having been taught in all the language of the Nephites. See, this is just like Nephi's. I, Nephi, having been born of goodly parents, therefore I was taught somewhat in the learning of my father. This is not a coincidence. This is a common motif in the Hebrew culture. Hugh Nibley says this was the common way to begin a personal record and served as an introduction to the author to establish the bona fides of the speaker. Anyway, it indicates that Zeniff was an educated man and most probably a very good man. He says, as that first verse continues, and having been sent out as a spy among the Lamanites, that I might spy out their forces, that our army might come upon them and destroy them. But when I saw that which was good among them, I was desirous that they should not be destroyed. So here we see that he was a man of principle and good conscience. And it continues, therefore I contended with my brethren in the wilderness, For I would that our ruler should make a treaty with them. But he, being an austere and bloodthirsty man, commanded that I should be slain. But I was rescued by the shedding of much blood, for father fought against father and brother against brother, until the greater part of our army was destroyed in the wilderness. And we returned, those of us that were spared, to Zarahemla to relate the tale to their wives and their children. This tells the story that is alluded to but not explained in Omni, verses 27 and 30. There we read, "And I would speak somewhat concerning a certain number who went up into the wilderness to return to the land of Nephi, for there was a large number who were desirous to possess the land of their inheritance." Now remember, we just read in Mosiah 7 that, speaking of Zeniff, he and his followers wanted to inherit this land, which was the land of their fathers. Great consistency. So here in chapter 9, we are hearkening back to both Mosiah 7 and also to Omni. Continuing on in Omni now, "Wherefore they went up into the wilderness, and their leader being a strong and mighty man, and a stiff-necked man, wherefore he caused a contention among them, and they were all slain, save 50 in the wilderness, and they returned again to the land of Zarahemla. And it came to pass that they also took others to a considerable number, and took their journey again into the wilderness. And I, Amaleki, had a brother who also went with them, and I have not since known concerning them. And I am about to lie down in my grave, and the plates are full, and I make an end of my speaking." This is very sad for Amaleki, but really, how cool is this? In Omni, we get one side of the story from Amaleki, who lost a brother and will die not knowing what happened to him. But he does share with us that they left Zarahemla. Their leader was a bad guy, and a fight broke out, and a lot of them died, and the rest came back. But then they got more people and left again, and that's it. And then in Mosiah 7, we get Mosiah, who clearly knows of the people who left a long time ago, but knows nothing of them. And then in Mosiah 9, we get to Zeniff's record, which is giving us the other side of the story. Zeniff tells us why the fight broke out, which information we get nowhere else. First, he tells us that he saw some good in the Lamanites, which ties directly back to Jacob 3, where Jacob declared, "Behold, the Lamanites your brethren, whom ye hate because of their filthiness, and the cursing which hath come upon their skin, are more righteous than you." And then he says, "Behold, their husbands love their wives, and their wives love their husbands, and their husbands and their wives love their children." This is what Zeniff must have seen as he was spying on them, and like Jacob, he saw that there was some good in them, even though they were enemies. So it was Zeniff that tried to rein in his leader, and the leader's refusal to consider that led to the battle, which killed all but 50 of the men. And then in verse 3 of Mosiah 9, we see that it was Zeniff that led more people back into the wilderness. He says, somewhat humbly, "And yet I, being overzealous to inherit the land of our fathers, collected as many as were desirous to go up to possess the land, and started again our journey into the wilderness to go up into the land. But we were smitten with famine and sore afflictions, for we were slow to remember the Lord our God." Notice that he says the reason they were smitten by famine and sore afflictions was because they were slow to remember God. Again, we see the message of the Book of Mormon, which we will hear over and over again throughout this year. "When ye keep my commandments, ye shall prosper in the land. But when ye keep not my commandments, the land shall be cursed for your sake." I appreciate the humility displayed by Zeniff in his record. That shows me that he was a good man. His efforts and his desires were all good, but things still were not perfect. I suspect that was because of the people with him more so than he himself. He had wanted to make a treaty with the Lamanites originally, and now he was able to do that, although he found out much later that it was a trick, and his people, after a few years, were put in bondage. At the beginning, though, it was a good deal. The Lamanite king gave them the land of Lehi-Nephi, which is what they wanted, and they were able to rebuild the old buildings in the city of Shiloh. They planted crops, and the record says, "And we began to till the ground, yea, even with all manner of seeds, of corn, and of wheat, and of barley, and of nees, and of shaum, and with seeds of all manner of fruits, and we did begin to multiply and prosper in the land." Researchers today believe that nees and shaum may have been quinoa and caoutchouc, two grains that are indigenous to parts of South America. Well, things went well for Zeniff and his people for 12 years, and the people of Shiloh prospered. But then the tide turned. It says, "Therefore it came to pass that after we had dwelt in the land for the space of 12 years, that King Laman began to grow uneasy, lest by any means my people should wax strong in the land, and they could not overpower them and bring them into bondage. Therefore it came to pass that King Laman began to stir up his people, that they should contend with my people. Therefore there began to be wars and contentions in the land." It doesn't really sound that different from today, does it? This is just politics and the preservation of power. It continues to occur today as commonly as it ever did in the Book of Mormon. Maybe that's why Mormon wanted to put this record in. Remember, his mandate was to keep in the abridgment those things that would be of greatest worth and benefit to us today. So it was not enough to simply say in Mosiah 7 that a certain group of people left, or to say in Omni that these people left, fought, came back, and left again. Mormon wanted us to know why and how all of this occurred, because it still goes on today, and we need to recognize it and the causes of it. But it sounds like the people of Shiloh had put their lives together pretty well. So when the Lamanites did come up against them, they were ready. It says, "For in the 13th year of my reign in the land of Nephi, away on the south of the land of Shiloh, when my people were watering and feeding their flocks and tilling their lands, a numerous host of Lamanites came upon them and began to slay them and to take off their flocks and the corn of the fields. Yea, and it came to pass that they fled, all that were not overtaken, even into the city of Nephi, and did call upon me for protection. And it came to pass that I did arm them with bows and with slings and with all manner of weapons which we could invent. And my people did cry mightily to the Lord, that he would deliver us out of the hands of our enemies. For we were awakened to a remembrance of the deliverance of our fathers. And God did hear our cries and did answer our prayers. And we did go forth in his might. Yea, we did go forth against the Lamanites, and in one day and a night we did slay 3,043. We did slay them even until we had driven them out of our land." Now this was about 70 years prior to Ammon's visit to King Limhi. And it says that at that time King Laman died, but the challenge of the Lamanites did not abate much over time. Zeniff says, "And it came to pass that we did go up to battle against the Lamanites, and it came to pass that we did go up in the strength of the Lord to battle. Now the Lamanites knew nothing concerning the Lord, nor the strength of the Lord. Therefore they depended upon their own strength. Yet they were a strong people as to the strength of men. They were wild, a ferocious and bloodthirsty people, believing in the traditions of their fathers, which is this: believing that they were driven out of the land of Jerusalem because of the iniquities of their fathers, and they were wronged in the wilderness by their brethren, and they were wronged while crossing the sea." Without getting too political, this sounds just like the issues going on with the Palestinians and the Israelis today. In fact, exactly the same. Zeniff's account of all the grievances of the Lamanites goes on for several more verses, but the bottom line is they thought they had been wronged at every turn and in every condition, and for this they hated the Nephites. But there is a lesson here. Zeniff says they were very strong as to the strength of men, indicating to me that they were perhaps stronger than Zeniff's men, and yet Zeniff was not afraid. he says this, "And now I, Zeniff, after having told all these things unto my people concerning the Lamanites, I did stimulate them to go to battle with their might, putting their trust in the Lord. Therefore we did contend with them face to face. And it came to pass that we did drive them out of our land, and we slew them with a great slaughter, even so many that we did not number them. And it came to pass that we returned to our own land, and my people again began to tend their flocks and to till their ground." The key to understanding all this is the same as understanding all of the battles in the Book of Mormon. And keep in mind, there are 176 pages of wars in the Book of Mormon. That's 1/3 of the book. And the lesson is always this: when the people are righteous and remember to follow the statutes of the Lord, they will go forth in His strength, not theirs. And when they have forgotten the Lord and His commandments, they will always fall, regardless of their strength. Now, just one more thing before I close. Let's go back to Mosiah 7, back to where Limhi is still telling his story to Ammon. Remember, he is the third king of the people after Zeniff, and after his son, King Noah, who was Limhi's father. Limhi was a humble man, but it seems his people were not always so, nor was his father, the previous king. Here again we are given a glimpse of something profound that happened, and we will hear about it soon enough, but not in this chapter of Limhi. Limhi is talking to Ammon and airing the dirty laundry of his people, if you will. And he says this: "For if this people had not fallen into transgression, the Lord would not have suffered that this great evil should come upon them. But behold, they would not hearken unto his words. But there arose contentions among them, even so much that they did shed blood among themselves. And a prophet of the Lord have they slain, yea, a chosen man of God, who told them of their wickedness and abomination, and prophesied of many things to come, even the coming of Christ. He said that men were created after the image of God, and that God should come down among the children of men and take upon him flesh and blood, and go forth upon the face of the earth. And now because he said this, they did put him to death. And many more things did they do, which brought down the wrath of God upon them. Therefore, who wondereth that they are in bondage, and that they are smitten with sore afflictions?" The prophet Limhi is referring to the prophet Abinadi, who appeared before his own father, the wicked King Noah. This is the first allusion or mention of that story, and it does not say Abinadi's name, but it was him nevertheless. I mention this not only because of that, but also because that occasion where Abinadi was put to death was the same occasion that caused one of Noah's priests to steal away into the jungle with a few followers and become the man we all know as Alma. It is interesting that Limhi apparently is not aware of Alma or his story, but then I guess that's the purpose of stealing away quietly. We will get into this story quite deeply quite soon, but let me share this much with you right now. Alma, he being a descendant of Nephi, and he was a young man, and he believed the words which Abinadi had spoken, for he knew concerning the iniquity which Abinadi had testified against them. Therefore he began to plead with the king that he would not be angry with Abinadi, but would suffer that he might depart in peace. But the king was more wroth, and caused that Alma should be cast out from among them, and he sent his servants after him that they might slay him. But he hid from before them, and they found him not. And he, being concealed many days, did write all the words which Abinadi had spoken. So it makes sense that Limhi would not have known the story of Alma. He was the next king of the people who killed Alma, and I'm sure the only record he would have had would be the fact that a prophet came into town, offended his father, and was put to death over the objection of some of his people. If Noah's people could never find Alma, then they would have had no knowledge of what he did, where he went, the waters of Mormon, or any of it. Again, this account seems very real to me and very consistent with the conditions put forth in the record. As I study these scriptures, I am amazed how consistent they are, and how one little tidbit in this very, very short book of Omni, the words of Amaleki and Omni, can tie to the words of Mosiah and can tie to the words of Zeniff, and all of it comes together and fills in a full picture. This is the beauty of the Book of Mormon. It's a true book, and when a book like this is true, all the pieces fit. That, to me, is a great testimony of the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon. I wish to bear you my testimony. I know the Book of Mormon is true. I know that Alma was a real man. I know that Ammon was a real man. I know that Zeniff was a real man. And I know that Mosiah and King Benjamin were real men. And I am certain that over the next few years, as archaeology continues to make incredible strides in Central America, that we will find all these places, and one day we'll be able to identify the city of Nephi and the city of Shiloh and the city of Lehi-Nephi. We'll learn all of that stuff, and we'll see that this magnificent record has been true all along. I bear you my testimony of the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon and of these things, and I do it in Jesus' name. Amen. I'm Mark Swint. Thank you for listening.